I'm Tim Ernster, recently retired city manager for the city of Sedona. We are at El Portal in Tlaquepaque. I was city manager for a little over 5.5 years. Sedona is a wonderful community, and I have a lot of friends here. My support group is here, and I can't imagine living anywhere else right now. We had some challenges when I first arrived here. Obviously, we were in the midst of a pretty serious recession, and that was affecting the city's revenues. And we had to make some very serious budget cuts that first year. Had to go through some layoffs and reduction in staff. And it was a very challenging time for the staff, but I have to say that the staff worked together as a team. The council was very supportive. We made a lot of changes that first year, and I think because we all worked as a team, we were able to pull ourselves out of the financial situation that we were in and develop a strong budget. Well, when I arrived, that first 6 months of the year, which would have been the second half of 2009, our revenues dropped 12% compared to the previous year. And that's a significant drop for Sedona. And so we had to immediately begin looking at the budget and cutting wherever we could. And we cut as much as we could out of the operating budget, but it wasn't enough. So then we had to look at reducing the size of our staff. And so we did some of that through attrition, positions that were vacant because of people leaving the city, but we also had to have a layoff. And I believe we had to lay off 8 positions at that time. So it was a very, very challenging time for the city. Well, you never feel good about laying off employees and knowing how it affects not only the employee but the employee's family. So it was an extremely difficult thing for me to do, but it was something that had to be done. And what we tried to do is look at positions in the city that were possibly not as critical as other positions, and find ways to reduce the workforce in those areas. The debt is something that you have to pay. It's like making a car payment. And before you stop making your car payment and possibly risk losing your vehicle to get you back and forth to work and shopping, you're going to cut other things in your family budget. And maybe you don't go to as many movies or whatever. So as far as our debt's concerned, that was built into the budget, and we continued to make all of our debt service payments as planned. And that is something that we just had to do. And if you start tinkering with your debt service, it can have a big impact on the city as far as your bond rating and your ability to go out into the market in future years and refinance bonds or sell bonds. It affects your interest rate. In the long run, it can cost you a lot more money. So the debt that was built into the budget stayed there, and we continued to make our debt payments on a regular basis. One of the most controversial issues during my tenure was the issue with continuous roadway lighting on Highway 89A. It was a very difficult issue to deal with. When I arrived in Sedona, we had a council that had voted to approve continuous roadway lighting on Highway 89A. And then that council, 4 of those members were defeated in the 2010 election, and we had a new council come in. The new council had a different opinion about lighting on 89A, and they directed staff to negotiate with the Arizona Department of Transportation for a route transfer of Highway 89A as it went through Sedona. And so we were able to do that, and in 2011, in early 2011, the City Council voted to approve the route transfer agreement with the Arizona Department of Transportation. But as you know, after that was approved by the council, there was a referendum started to overturn the City Council's decision, and that actually succeeded in late 2011. And so the Arizona Department of Transportation went ahead and installed the lighting on 89A. And that was a very challenging issue, very controversial, very divisive in the community. It created a lot of pressure for staff because the city manager's job is basically to carry out the direction of the city council as long as it's moral, ethical, and legal. And so basically, regardless of how you might feel personally about an issue, you have to go ahead and carry out the city council's policies. Or you can elect to go someplace else and be a city manager in some other community. So it was very difficult for the staff. It was very challenging. And that was probably the most challenging issue during the entire 5.5-year period of my tenure in Sedona.
It seems like in Sedona there's no issue that's too small that we can't be divided.
That Sedona is very unique in that respect because I've worked for a number of communities in Arizona, and by far Sedona is the most unique in that respect. First of all, if the route transfer had proceeded, I think the city could have managed that financially. I really think that we could have been able to manage that financially. However, from my perspective, the lighting that was installed is very low profile, low impact lighting. It certainly helps with visibility on Highway 89A. I have to admit there have been times driving on Highway 89A at night. There were times where it was very difficult to see pedestrians crossing the street. So I think the lighting was really a good thing. And however, I do believe that had we gone ahead with the route transfer, we could have made that work. There were controversial issues like the chemtrails, which popped up in the fall of 2011, is now coming back again. As I was leaving Sedona, there's quite a large group of citizens that now are again concerned about chemtrails. Smart meters has been an issue now for a couple years and continues to be an issue in the community. Interestingly enough, though, those are issues that the city really doesn't have a lot of control over. And one of the frustrations that I had during my tenure is that we tended to get sidetracked on issues that the city really didn't have a lot of control over, which then took us away from focusing in on those things that we did have control of. So those types of issues, in my opinion, are distractions, and they take up a lot of staff time. In the case of smart meters, some city resources as far as paying outside legal counsel to represent us on various issues related to the smart meters. And the frustrating part to me is that realistically, we don't have a lot of control over those issues. Those are more for a higher level of government, or possibly they're just issues that are regulated by other organizations such as the Corporation Commission. So those were distractions for the city. Probably one of the biggest disappointments I have is that we were never able to figure out a way to identify a revenue stream for capital projects. Right now we're spending our excess reserves to fund our capital budget, and we have enough reserves available within the council policy to last for a couple years. And then after that, we don't have any revenue stream other than savings at the end of each fiscal year to put into our capital reserve account. The problem with that is right now the only capital projects that we are doing are the critical infrastructure projects. For the most part, there's a few parks projects in there, but for the most part it's critical infrastructure projects. And there's more to cities than just critical infrastructure. There's quality of life projects that Sedona should be looking at. But until we find a way to identify a source of revenue for our capital budget, it's not going to happen. And we took a number of different proposals to council over the last 2 to 3 years, and we just couldn't get council to agree with any of those proposals. So that's going to be one of the challenges that Sedona faces now in the next few years, is how do you deal with that? I think that the economics aren't going to change in Sedona for a couple different reasons. First of all, as far as diversifying the economy, we really don't have that many opportunities to do that because we don't have a lot of land available, vacant land available for development where you could actually make that happen. We're very different than Cottonwood and Clarkdale and Camp Verde. Economic development in Sedona is something, in my opinion, is a lot different than it would be in Cottonwood. Cottonwood has the Old Town, which is an economic engine that is just ripe for development, and it's flourishing right now. We don't have an Old Town. Cottonwood is willing to accept developments that Sedona would never accept. We would never go out and try to bring in big box stores because they would be competing with the small businesses that we have in Sedona. Our expectations for the quality of development are much higher than they are in other surrounding communities, and that has an impact on economic development. So from my perspective, we need to be looking at some other factors dealing with economic development. We need to be looking at business retention. that make sure that we do everything we can to keep the businesses that are here, keep them in Sedona. We need to work with property owners, commercial property owners that have a lot of vacant space to help fill up those spaces. We need to make sure that as an organization we are providing the best customer service possible, that we're transparent, that we're responsive to the public, and that in itself is something that will help economic development. So I think we're a lot different than other communities, and I don't think we have a lot of opportunity to significantly diversify our economy. I think we are tourism driven, and we always will be tourism driven. And we just need to, as a city, we need to do the best job we can to serve our existing businesses and make sure that we're providing the best service we can in the most non-bureaucratic way we can.